Happy Monday to you, NIO fam. It's Monday, February 9th, 2026. It's about 10 minutes after 7 a.m. Central Time, so we're a little more than an hour away from market open here in the US. And I didn't get a video out over the weekend, so I wanted to do a follow-up from last week's video and at least talk short-term stock price, what I was seeing and thinking. And in fact, if we look at this 4 a.m. Eastern time, this window here, and I'll passively do this. I don't often talk about it, but I'll passively track this for NIO and for other, stocks, not just Chinese stocks, the SPY, the futures S&P 500. Um, I, Sometimes I'm just curious if there's an alignment and maybe this is representing what big money is doing or how they have their preset high frequency trading algorithms set. I know late in the week when NIO did have a move up and we had bigger volume, these were green. And so the pre-market was green even before the trading started. So maybe it's nothing. But again, with just respect to the short-term stuff, I thought I'd share it since it was, red to start the week here. NIO right now, $4.97 pre-market is where they're trading. And let's talk because at the bottom of the screen, I've got the three short-term stock price indicators. The first being trade volume. And I'm going to zoom in to the very near term because on Thursday, we had the first 100 million share trade volume day for NIO in this year of 2026. And then that was followed up on Friday with not quite 100 million shares, but over 90 million, I think, was traded or were traded during the day. So what did that move look like from Wednesday to the end of Friday? You had Wednesday, the close would have been $4.44, and the close on Friday was $5.04. So consistent with what we've seen with NIO in the last few years, where those 100 million share trade volume days seem to, almost always be bullish for the stock, but that is short term. And if that's not maintained, if we don't see more of those days, then the shorts can regain control or maintain control, and price action can remain boring or not exciting, or at least not moving up to the upside explosively like we have seen in the past. Also, the FTD data, just a quick recap, we did get recent data. And it continues to be, with these white lines representing, the continued elevated spiking, and the fact that we haven't had big trade volume, but we continue to see these elevated spikes makes me even more, confident that we're probably not going to see any big moves to the upside for NIO stock unless we see big trade volume, and maybe we'll need to see big trade volume and these FTDs drop off. Like, what if something like this happens and we see the FTDs completely drop down and off, and at the same time we have big trade volume? Are we going to see explosive moves from NIO? It's certainly possible. And so there's a lot, yet to unfold here in this year of 2026. It's still very early. And so there's a lot more to track, and I'll continue to track it and share it here on the channel. Also, I wanted to share, as far as sentiment, I have a few things queued up, a couple that are very, almost, I would say, minor. And one is this. This is just from my channel here on NIO, the most recent video I did, and it was the NIO profit alert. So there's, positive fundamental news that NIO announced. I did a video. It was a quick video. But here's what's interesting to me on the sentiment side of things. Two things. First off, the views. I had over 3,000 on this one. The previous 4 videos, not even 2,000 views on any of them. And I was kind of laughing about this. No dislikes on the most recent video, yet you've got several on each of the previous, even though there were fewer views. So I thought that was really fascinating. Perhaps a sign of shifting sentiment, but not much sentiment shifting. And I'll show you why in just a second. First, I wanted to share this as well. The other platform that I'm on, this 1,500 number, and I did a retweet because I was curious to see if I was still kind of being blocked, or if those views would be up. So I don't really track the retweets often, so I don't have a good comparison for that. But it just over 800 on the last video that I'd done, prior to that, and then 1,000 on the one before. So again, these are just simple indicators. I don't consider them to represent much of the NIO global community, because frankly, there are a lot of folks who still don't know who I am. But this, you might find a little more interesting. If we look at the most recent, and so even just this last week, the Reddit mentions for NIO capped at about 30. Now check this out. I'm going to zoom out and we'll look at the bigger picture. And as you see, not only do we have a very different price point, but these Reddit mentions were really elevated during that time frame where not only did we have huge trade volume and the FTD levels drop down to perhaps what normal levels are, but we saw the run up from NIO and the really it was maintained. The price point was maintained for a while. So anyway, I thought that was something that you might all find interesting. And so here's your kind of metric. This is the 500 level here, if you can see that. And so 30 mentions is barely a blip on the radar, frankly. So, and this is the big picture that I'm talking about. We also had some positive news from NIO also with respect to the fundamental side, not just the announcement of profits, but NIO with 100 million power swaps achieved. My view with the long term on NIO has always been that this is an IDE, an innovative driven enterprise. And with those companies, they have to do a lot of heavy investment before they become profitable. They can have explosive growth once they're profitable, and they can surprise a lot of folks. But early on, it's very common for these companies to have a lot of negativity and sort of I call it the short thesis or the bear case thesis, where until the model is proven out and things like the company being able to hit profitability and then maintain that, also things like the power swaps early on, I remember a lot of folks were very negative and bearish on that, didn't think it would work. So just a couple of thoughts that I wanted to offer. And I did not get to the comments section from this video, and I debated about doing a long form video and actually doing a comments response and highlighting each one as I've done in the past, but I also wasn't sure how long this video would be. And gosh, I'm already over 7 minutes. Maybe I should take a shot. I don't know. What do you think? Maybe not. Let's do this. Let's zoom out just a little bit and look at the move that NIO made from under $4 to about $8. And it did so from July of 2025 into about, I think it was maybe the early part of October. So a several month move before the trade volume, and this is the trade volume here, dropped back down. And with that, the stock price came back down also, as I shared and showed with this, and this is the whole history of NIO stock, the yellow representing the stock price, but the white being the FTDs, where there could have been naked shorting or manipulation of the stock price. And so those being elevated with, and especially in tandem with low trade volume on the daily side of things, that's just why, I think the easiest thing, if we're not talking about TA and we're just tracking the daily trade volume, I think that remains a pretty strong indicator. And I think once we see things like, for example, back when the Reddit mentions were so high and we had elevated trade volume, there was a 6-month window where NIO stock ran from $3.50 to over $55. That was not the high. It was also not the low, but that's a huge move in 6 months. But what happened during that time frame is the FTDs dropped off almost completely, and we had 75 trade days within that 6-month period of over 100 million shares traded. So I have talked quite a bit about that metric and that data point, that trade volume, and how important it seems to be for NIO stock. And I just, as it continues to hold true, even in the most recent, days here in this year of 2026. I mean, let's look at just 2026, and then I'll close off this video, or we'll wrap it. This is basically December of 2025. And then even into the end of the year, there was a little attempt at moving up on slightly bigger volume, but even this volume here, that was just an 80 million trade volume day. This was an 83 million trade volume day. So interesting that we continue to see the same trend where, from again, roughly a close on Wednesday of last week, $4.44. But then, you see just a single day of 100 million share trade volume. And yes, it came with positive fundamental news, followed by about 90 million shares. And you then have the stock close, at $5.04, up from just 2 days earlier, closing at $4.44. I don't know. but it continues to be very fascinating. And so, and in that video, that last video that I did, I asked the question. I was like, "What do you think? Are we going to get?" Because I dropped it early pre-market before the market was even open. I said, "Do you think we're going to see a 100 million share trade volume day?" And I think only one person commented. I haven't gotten through all the comments, but I tried to track them a little bit. I was out of town that day. So I just thought it was interesting that, and I wonder how many people are really paying attention to that. I don't know, but I'm going to keep talking about it because as long as it, continues to seemingly remain relevant and valid and maybe even really important, I'm just going to keep talking about it. So, but I've talked more than I intended. I really thought this was going to be a shorter video, but it's fine. It's all good. Maybe I'll still do a comments response video. And if I can't, I'll try to actually get to those comments. But what do you think about today? It is 7:21 a.m. We're still more than an hour before market open. So by the time I get this out, the market probably still won't be open. But I'll be curious what people are thinking if they make it to the end of this video and tell me what their thoughts are on a 100 million share trade volume day. How about not just for today, Monday, but any day this week? Do you think we'll see that or not?